Hello friends, I am Rob, and I'm here once more for the last part, I suspect, of the video response that I have to comments that I received on my Lair of OmnusI 18.5 level, where I talked about GURPS, by new subscriber John Lanman, who's been putting out some very nice comments. I appreciate that, and has inspired me to make these, now 3 videos so far. And this is what he asked about. I'm going to eliminate the stuff that I've already addressed. He wanted to know more about different systems for different games that I have and that I have experiences with. And I covered those in the first 2 systems. First about core resolution mechanics, and then about character creation, design, and advancement. So, that's where I compared and contrasted the different systems that are available, at least the ones that I have experience on. Now, not saying that's a finite number, and people could come up with certainly more things than that, but it seems to be what the industry has accepted as the most common ways of resolving those different mechanics. So, as far as a more detailed overview on all of the different games that I have and all of the different games that I have access to, many of those are going to have to wait as I do reviews on those games. Some of them I've done character witnesses on and will continue to elaborate, but those are videos for the future. If anybody wishes to see a particular video on something that they've seen in my collection or something, well, hey, just a simple comment to an older video is getting me to do these video responses. I am more than happy to make custom content for people. So if you want to see something on a specific game that I've mentioned, just let me know. But finally, I'd also be interested in your insights on rights restrictions, level of marketplace for the various systems, and even your opinions on the chances for an independent RPG studio to compete in a world so dominated by Wizards of the Coast. And of course, love what you do. So that makes me feel good. But here's the thing. Your best source of information is from a wide variety of people. There are blogs out there from very intelligent people who know people in the industry, and from game designers themselves who have blogs about their experiences, which can probably tell you more exacting information than I can. So I always recommend getting your information from a plurality, a variety of different people. Some you can discount as being self-serving or overly opinionated without a lot of factual basis. You get a lot of that. You get some YouTubers who do that too, just so you know. But my personal opinion on this, first of all, as far as marketability goes, if you're going to do a role-playing game, first thing, and I've touched on this in the previous 2 videos, you need an elevator pitch. That term doesn't have the same significance it did back in the day, but basically the idea of you have to sell yourself to the people that you're interested in outspeaking to. If you're selling this to a company, you have to have something that you can quickly lay out that'll attract their interest and see the potential that you see in your game. If you're selling it to the customer, if you can't sum up what makes your game unique and special and the experiences people can expect to have using your product in 2 or 3 sentences, it's time to retool because it's too complicated and you're going to lose out on a lot. So for instance, you want to talk about Lord of the Rings. I want to try to describe Lord of the Rings to you in just 2 or 3 sentences. Okay? A hobbit, a normal, everyday hobbit, is dragged into adventure by by a variety of characters in a magical world beset by the evils of the Dark Lord Sauron. This hobbit and his companions face numerous perils and tragedy along the way, but eventually come through on the other side, triumphing over evil. Now, did I explain the nuances of Aragorn and all of that? No. Why? It's not really about Aragorn. It's about Bilbo in The Hobbit, and it's really about Frodo and his journey in the Fellowship of the Ring. This may seem to be blasphemy to some people, but really, if you're trying to connect to the person who's the most relatable, it's Frodo. It's the poor guy who's just dragged off. Maybe he was interested in adventure as a young and excitable hobbit, but he certainly would not have gone through all the stuff that he went through by choice. Same thing with Bilbo. Bilbo got dragged into the adventure, and that made him far more relatable than some king and heir to an ancient empire who fell in love with an elven princess. I mean, he's cool. He's a character you root for. And I mean, yeah, after all, the Return of the King, his name is right on it. But Frodo's the relatable character here. You may love Aragorn. You may love Gandalf, and I certainly do. You may love Legolas and Gimli. You may love Owen, Glóin, Dori, Nori, and Ori, and Thorin, and you may love all those characters from the Lord of the Rings series. But it really comes down to the story of a journey. The hero's journey in John Campbell's expression. And that's the story that I'm really telling, is how this person goes from being just a small person in a small little village tucked out of the corner to being the most important person in the world. Bilbo becomes the most important person because he brings the One Ring out from the shadows and Gollum and puts it into play, where the world can be saved by the trials of his nephew Frodo. And all those other characters, they serve to make the magic real. They serve to put the world in context. But ultimately, if it doesn't have Frodo and Bilbo, didn't matter. Just another fantasy story. But what really makes it exceptional is it takes the everyman and moves him through a story about becoming a hero. Not by force of arms, although, you know, there's a little fighting, but because of cleverness, pluck, and an inner reserve of courage that neither of them really suspected they had until it was called upon. The fact that ever since then, hobbits have been labeled as being exceptionally brave. Was there anything about Bilbo or Frodo at first glance that made you think they would be exceptionally brave? I mean, they startled easily, and, you know, Bilbo dragged his heels as he was carried off to adventure. Frodo accepted the burden, but it wasn't with, you know, he wasn't eager to do any of the things that he was going to be called upon to do. He had no choice. It was to prevent a greater evil from happening. And that's the kind of bravery that's celebrated in those books. So, your game. If I'm going to have that sales pitch for my Spotlight system in my dice file game, it's that it is a nuanced system that uses the multitude of dice many gamers already have to allow them to play in any genre, under any scaling, a game where all of the dice they use matter. They all represent something, and they allow you to approximate just about any scenario that you would wish without a great deal of complication and excessive rules. So, you know, I have narrowed down the good things about my game and the things that I think really allow a person to enjoy it that other games might not have. And that's important. If you can't do that, then you've got problems. And sometimes you can go up to 3 sentences, I would say wouldn't be too terrible, but two would be pretty tight. Now, I've seen all kinds of games that have great hooks. There's one that I saw, and still kicking my butt that I didn't back, called Wild Sea. But I'm going to look forward to that one, where you have characters that basically trees have overgrown the earth. Overnight, seemingly massive trees grown up from the earth so that the ground is now nearly, is terrifying, and a night, a completely shrouded experience. Most people live on ships that sail over the treetops with using giant chainsaws to propel themselves. It's neat, it's quirky, I think it's really cool without even touching on the elements. That's almost sold me on the game right there. If I had the money, I would have backed it. Gods of Metal Ragnarok was another one of those. It's like, oh wow, you can play one of those heavy metal album cover worlds, and you can have your character as an avatar of rock serving one of the gods of rock and try to earn your place among the pantheon and fight against creatures that are all themed towards heavy metal, and that could be really cool. And I actually espoused that in a video. But you know, I didn't back it. Again, it was mostly money, but I thought it had a lot of good hooks to it. And again, compelling. Neither of them had any challengers in those aspects. They were unique to the best of my knowledge. So that's one of the biggest things, is if you can't nail an elevator pitch, if you can't narrow your game down, it's not going to do it. It's almost certainly not going to. So that's the first step. As far as rights restrictions goes, if you are going to put out something, you should, first of all, it sounds like John already has a company. Great. At the very least, get an LLC, limited licensing entity, so that, you know, you have a body that is responsible for maintaining your stuff. If you are just a single writer who is self-publishing, that's not as important. But if you are going to put out a suite of things and interact with other companies, I recommend it. I've heard horror stories about people who didn't do that and were personally then sued and devastated because of, you know, just ill-considered decisions. I would recommend doing that if you don't already have something like that. It's just a good legal structure to have around you. Kind of the idea of a curtain wall of a castle. Kind of protects you. It's not very expensive either. It doesn't take a long time to set up. I don't have one of those, but then again, I haven't really done a great deal, so if I do, I will certainly make one of those. Now, that's the first thing. Number two is you're going to have to protect your rights, okay? If you have a copyright to something, if other people infringe on your copyrights, you have to defend it. You can do cease and desists and stuff like that, but you just bear in mind what you create has value, and protecting it is worthwhile if it has any value to you. So there's an awful lot of plagiarism that goes on, and there's a lot of people who borrow liberally from other people's ideas. You're going to have to think about that at some point. Fortunately, oftentimes people are kind of understanding, and a single cease and desist to some dreamer out there who saw your stuff and he's making an homage that's a little bit more than an homage to your stuff, to a bigger company that just glommed onto whole sections of your stuff. You got to protect your stuff or you're losing your copyright. So they have to be defended. That is important. So anytime you make something and put it out there, it has a value, and you have to think if it's worth defending. If it isn't, well, was it worth putting out in the first place? And obviously for some people it is. There are passion projects aplenty out there, but if you're really interested in becoming an entrepreneur or having your own indie platform, that's something that you need to do. So find a good lawyer, especially copyright lawyers. Level of marketplace is a tough one because, first of all, anybody can make a game. Self-publishing, easy to do. You make your game, proofread it if you want, edit it if you want. A lot of people don't even do that, and they just dribble it on up to Amazon or Drive-Thru-RPG or RPG Marketplace or itch.io or any number of places. And for most part, it's relatively free to do that. But if it's relatively free, that means it gets drowned among all the others around you. So unless you have a really good hook and you have some sort of a presence, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to be in, yes, I have something published, and maybe you'll have something you can link other people to, and that'll be it, unless you do more. First of all, important thing, social media presence. Every single personal writer should have a social media presence. I mean, I have OmnusI, which it's great for the few people in my hobby who pay attention to me. But, you know, get Twitter, get Instagram, get a Facebook group and put a Facebook page so that you can put out information on your product. Do it. Absolutely. Do Twitter. Some people actually pay companies to run all this stuff for them because they aren't themselves very adept with social media. But it's a huge avenue just waiting for you. Then there's paid advertising. Paid advertising can be very effective. Facebook, for instance, constantly will court you if you make a kind of business page that, hey, we'll give you a discount to boost your posts so that more people can see your product. Honestly, not a bad idea. You could spend your money in worse ways. Otherwise, if there is some other platform out there that you want to get into, like if you want to have paid advertisements with popular YouTubers, that's possible. I have no idea what the rates are for that, so I cannot help you there. But I'm seeing more and more of these small companies putting their ads in mid-rolls in the middle of the videos I like to watch. And so that is an available platform that works for some people, especially if you have a niche that you're shooting for and you can find, you know, for example, if you're making a sci-fi game and you find people doing live plays of sci-fi games, you know, you could think about sponsoring them, saying, hey, I've got a game, would you like to try it? I'll give you the game if you play it. And maybe they do. And maybe that really works out for you at the cost of your game, and maybe a little funding to fuel their snacks or whatever. Maybe you can get a sponsored video out for you, which could be kind of cool. The more popular the channel, the more that's going to cost you, of course. And again, I don't know what YouTube's rates are if you just want to put advertisements in different gaming-related sites. I don't know that. That's something that you're going to have to research. But it can be very profitable because that's where a lot of eyes are. A lot of people turn to YouTube and other entertainment sites. And as a result, that's a perfect place to put entertainment-related advertising. Obviously, if you're the big boys, you can put stuff on TV, but you know, we're talking big money here, not what indie folks generally are going to do. But between constantly advertising and beating your own drum on social media, which you have to do and absolutely should if you hope to get anywhere, and finding outlets to get other people interested, absolutely. Another big one is conventions. You should hit the major conventions. If you can get a booth at Gen Con, at Origins, at Dragon Con, at all of these different ones, it only helps get your product out in front of the gamers. And they're your market, so do it. It's going to cost you money. Oh yes, it will. Those booths are not free, not by any stretch of the imagination. And you're going to have somebody who's good at making your game marketable. That elevator pitch becomes absolutely essential. But that is your chance to rub shoulders with gamers and get them hooked on your stuff. Especially if they can see your passion. The face-to-face is often the thing that has sold me on a particular project. I'm running Mighty Protectors right now. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met Jeff D. and Jack Herman at Gamehole Con in Madison in 2018. So, or was it 2019? No, it's 2018. So yeah, that works. That word of mouth really works well. My friends at GUI Cube, for instance, started out just going to the conventions, and they got a pretty healthy, passionate following for it. So, and they tended their social media. They do a very good job of curating. It's really a good idea. Communication with the fan base too, and drumming people up. Sites like Discord, free, easy to set up and get people talking, and it also helps your developers and folks talk too, although some of those might be behind private rooms. But it can be a good place for networking and keeping people excited and dribbling out details on your stuff, and that's all very important to get people excited and get people energized and engaged in what you're selling, quite honestly. And as far as marketing, I talked about the elevator pitch. Another one is eye appeal. And this is one where a lot of games can really hit or miss. Art is important. Art should always be a big part of your budget unless you are the artist yourself. And even then, you should pay yourself for your time. But art is not free, and the best art is definitely not free, but it is so worthwhile. Art draws the eye in. It's the other stuff that keeps them there, but if you never get past that first hello, if you never get them to pay attention because they see something amazing or beautiful, you lost a lot of opportunities there. Sure, there are people like me who will go up to every booth and they'll talk to the person, especially the miserable looking ones that nobody's going to because they don't have art or something. But with the right art, something that really captures the essence of what you're doing, that Wild Sea game I was talking about earlier, Where else are you going to see an image of a sailing ship with chainsaws ripping through the upper foliage of a tree? Nowhere. It's unique to them. It's immediately arresting and draws people like, I want a chainsaw ship. There you go. So art is important. Striking up good relationships with artists. You don't necessarily have to make them house artists, but striking a good relationship and finding out who has fair rates. Because, let's face it, we may all want to have a Larry Elmore on a cover of our game, but he's expensive, and he's also very busy. So you're going to have to wait a while for the really big artists, and it's going to cost you an awful lot. Finding somebody who fits your style, fits your theme, and resonates with you. You can give them a description, and they can imagine what you want and give you something. It may not be exactly what you pictured in your mind's eye, but if it works for your game and it draws people in, it will do. It will do. Of course, if you yourself have great artistic talent or have somebody in-house who does that, all the better. That does save you if you just, say, okay, how long did it take you? I'm going to pay you a fair rate, as opposed to pay you for each piece, which can get, pricey. But it's worth it. Having art in your stuff it's night and day. For some people, if they don't see pretty things in the book, that's a done deal. They won't consider it. You can, if you're on a budget, get by. You can get public domain and clip art. It's possible. But it's not ever going to be as good as actual, honest-to-goodness art created for your game. And again, that's something that you got a budget for. So, eye appeal, vocal appeal, mechanics that are visually pleasing and that can be understood. If you don't have those things, I'm afraid you're going to have a very tough road, and you're doomed to only have a very small following. You need sometimes to really risk a lot by spending that money to giving yourself a budget on things like conventions and art to have a chance is really what it comes down to. A couple of people that I've seen who really did it right, Doug Cole, who is the person behind Ballistic Games. He put out Dungeon Grappling, which if you look back at my Omnus Critic video for that, I was really impressed. He had a great product, and he sent me a PDF. I was so impressed I went and I bought the book afterward, because most of the videos that I do aren't sponsored, they aren't given to me. But that's what I did, and I got it. The other one that I got for review purposes was Black Pudding, which was fun. I really have got to get back to those reviews. And sometimes that's another expense, but quite honestly, promotional expenses by giving a PDF or a copy of something to a reviewer is just part of the business. You should get used to that idea too. Pay attention to who's a good game reviewer too, who can see the good side of your stuff. There's any number of hacks out there who just look at something and just dash off something and not good, or some that gush about something because they got a free copy of it. That's just as bad. It absolutely sabotages the impact of the review if they don't actually see the mechanical good of something, but they just kind of dash off praise because they got something for free. It sucks. It's pandering is what it is. So that also goes along with those sponsorships things. Giving out stuff to reviewers is, again, part of the deal. So there's that. Then you have to figure out what you're going to do with your baby once you've got it. Do you print it out? Do you digitally release it? Digitally release it immediately gets rid of your upfront cost. Putting it out in print is an expense, and a pretty sizable one too. That's why Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and all those other platforms are so popular, because you take care of a lot of the upfront cost with pre-sales, which is effectively what it is. It's pre-selling. That I've talked about. I've talked about Kickstarter at length, the perils and pitfalls of it. Here's the thing to know if you're considering Kickstarter. Number one, once you get into Kickstarter, first of all, it's more expense. You better make a good video, because otherwise you're just not going to do anything. Make a good video with somebody who, by God, loves your product and is passionate about it. Game developers or creators are usually the best at that because they have the most passion for their games. But Make it exciting. Make it something people want to get into and believe in. And then have a well laid out page where it shows step by step what makes your game awesome, what you're dreaming up. Put stretch goals into it, for goodness sakes. I've gotten into so many things just because I love the stretch goals of stuff. But don't overpromise. Don't do things that you won't be able to do. That's a big, just a warning sign for me. If I see, oh, when we get to $300,000, we're going to have all these miniatures that are going to be included with the Kickstarter. It sweetens the pot. But if I don't have confidence, you're making a print game and all of a sudden you promise miniatures included with it, I'm suddenly worried if you're going to be able to do that. I might not have confidence that you are going to have the stroke to be able to both put out a printed game and deal with these miniatures that you're promising. Yeah. Another thing too with the magics of Kickstarter is if you don't have most of a finished game, if you're just selling a promise, I won't even consider you. You better say you've got 90% of the game right there, show me some of your art, I won't consider it. No matter how cool your theme sounds, I need to have some evidence that you're going to finish it. If I don't think you're going to finish it, I'm not going to back it. So, it's a good idea to do. Don't leave the work ahead of when you get paid for it, as much as possible if you're an independent. Now, yes, if you work for somebody and you're getting paid by them and they say, okay, I want you to do this, that's different. And then they're going to want to see how you're doing and they're going to keep up with you. But if you're going to do something for other people, remember, from that point on, after that Kickstarter, if it's successful, you work for other people. Any free time you take, is risking that being time you regret having taken down the road as the deadlines start to loom. Think about it. You're always going to have the Kickstarter that you're supposed to be working on hanging like a millstone over you. It's not just free money. You are working for other people. And if you're one of those scum waffles who puts out a disingenuous Kickstarter, sells a lot of people on a dream you have no intention of doing, Ken Whitman, sorry, I don't know what came over me. But if you're the kind of person who does that, you're the worst slime on the internet, and you only get a couple of those, and the word gets out on you. I have some very good friends who personally love bringing to light all of these bad actors in Kickstarter. And for those of you who, put out a product, a dream, a fairly solid one, and you've got some credentials that make people believe that you're going to put out what you're going to do, and then down the road you make it very clear that you're working on all kinds of things that aren't that, and you're delinquent by quite a few years, you really need to get your house in order, and nobody should buy anything from you until you actually fulfill on your Kickstarter that you promised people. Very important. A couple other pitfalls for first-time Kickstarter people. Never promise free shipping. Always tell people that, yes, shipping will be added to your pledge. That is important because it's expensive. Most people can't afford that. Don't do it. Just say right there, we're going to include that as an extra expense onto the backer kits that you're going to get. Number two, never overpromise. Don't throw in things that aren't within the tight idiom of what you're going to do unless you are absolutely ironclad. You have a history of doing it. That's one of the things that kept me out of the Gods of Metal thing, but I think they had a little bit more cachet and things that they had done, so I was interested. They had dice, too. I love dice. But those are a couple things that you really have to watch out for. Attaching a well-known name in the industry is a good thing, too, but they all cost, every single one of them. No, I'm not interested in attaching my name to anybody's Kickstarter to help your visibility because nobody knows me yet. Hopefully in the future. But I will, again, repost that if you have a passion project and you are, stumbling for help, let me know. I sometimes help people. And if it's a project that you are passionate about and believe in, and you can make me believe in it, I often will offer free critique and advice and stuff, so can't hurt. So, Kickstarter can be a godsend for a lot of people. It can also be a horrible, horrible thing that happens to them as they get all of this money, spend it right away, and suddenly don't have the money to get their stuff published because that's part of your expense. Have realistic understandings about what that money is going to mean to you. need to have high enough costs that cover finalization of your product, any work that needs to be done, pay your artists, don't leave scandal hanging over your Kickstarter. And if it all comes off and it all works, and by God, if everything lines up and you can actually hit your shipping dates and deadlines, you've done well. And you deserve to brag about that and line up another Kickstarter jumping off of the successes you've had, learning from the mistakes and failures. I am much more interested in Kickstarters from people who have serially completed and successful Kickstarters. I am also savage about Kickstarters that fail in some way, shape, or form. For example, I've never made a secret that Cool Mini or Not make great games. They're pretty, they're basic, very basic and derivative. I've got some issues with that. But they freely just flaunt that they're deadlines. They don't ship on promise. And they were a year late on Massive Darkness, which I'm pretty bitter about. Almost a year late. So, yeah, that's important. Building trust is very important. Whether you have a small but loyal market or you have tens to hundreds of thousands of people who sing the praise of your product. If you prove yourself to not be trustworthy, it doesn't matter. It's all built on it's a castle built on sand. So, that's my thoughts on that. But the level of marketplace. If you have something unique that stands out, you have a much better chance than if you make just another fantasy role-playing game. My friend, Doug Cole, made his own Dragon Heresy. Beautiful game. He paid for amazing art. It's beautiful. It is based loosely off of Dungeons & Dragons rules, but there's more complexities to it. There's some things that he's really passionate about that he put into it. I don't think he broke even on it. Why? Because even though it's gorgeous, and it is, he made a beautiful game. It's another fantasy game. There's a lot of fantasy games out there. There's a lot of fantasy games that use D&D-like rules. And it got, buried in the works. It deserves to be as successful as a Zweihander or a Pendragon at least. I think it's good enough that it could have been, the Rollmaster of its time. But he'll never get that kind of market penetration because it's another fantasy game with its own unique world, unique monsters, beautiful stuff, absolutely gorgeous art. He did a masterful job. He managed his Kickstarter excellently because he's that good. He hit his deadlines because he's that good. But it's just another fantasy game without a massive hook to hang on it. You really need that. Why is Blades in the Dark so successful? Because it's it uses very simple mechanics, and it's got its own niche. It's got its own, we're going to be proper criminals building out our criminal organization, and we're going to plan out heists and execute them. I don't think any other game really has ever done that. That's great. That's its own niche. So, if you're going to create, I'm creating a universal game. Well, there's a lot of them out there. There's GURPS, but there's plenty of other ones. You need something to hang your hat on. Your elevator pitch helps with that. But you really need something concrete along with your elevator pitch that makes your game unique to the point where it will have some penetrability into the market. Now, it's also important to have reasonable expectations. You are not going to be the world of Wizards of the Coast killer. Good luck. They have all the money of Hasbro behind them. They have marketing. They have TV ads. They have whatever they want. They can create shows and movies. You are not going to kill them. Nor should you, quite honestly. They're actually good for the industry, bring in lots and lots of people, but a lot of those people who come in and play Dungeons & Dragons eventually get tired of Dungeons & Dragons, which leaves opportunities for you. Now, don't try to tackle them, and don't hold up your standards of success along with Wizards of the Coast. You're not going to be pushing millions and millions of dollars of product. Even the best role-playing games out there, the ones that count themselves as being successful, their sales are measured in maybe tens of thousands of books. Quite honestly, that's the truth of it. That's why, unless you have a big publishing house, you never want to get into a position where you've got 5,000 copies of your game sitting in your garage. A lot of dreamers do that because buying books in bulk is cheaper than buying them individually. But then you have to sell them. You have to drag them out to conventions and constantly try to get people to buy them from you. You probably have to lower your rates a couple of times so that they're more attractive to people. But you do it because you've got this massive amount of stock you have to get rid of. Companies like TSR, who seem so big that they could never fail, drowned in all of the stock they couldn't sell. They published so much stuff, the market eventually just collapsed on itself, and they strangled on it all. So, don't try to say that you're Wizards of the Coast and that you're going to supplant Wizards of the Coast as the tentpole of the gaming industry. It's not going to happen. And you shouldn't really shoot for that if you're an indie market. Start small. Start with a few hundred people. Grow that out by word of mouth. Encourage them to tell others about it, to play their games and live stream them. Go to people who live stream games and say, hey, I've got a game for you I'd like to give. Try it out. Show it to other people. Great. That can get you hundreds, if not thousands of people interested in your product. Have a really nice website to make that attractive so they want to come in and buy it. One of the failings that Doug has is that I think his website's kind of basic and bland, but yeah, it's okay. And then make that stuff available to sell. Go make a healthy relationship with distributors if you can. See if any of them will send your stuff out to game stores. That can be a really big thing. If they're seen on shelves, somebody might walk by and go, just that right person at the right time, right place, go, oh, that's a new game. Huh, that's not like anything I've got before. I'm going to try it. You know, people have stimulus money, tax refunds in their pocket or something like that. Yeah, all of a sudden that becomes much more compelling. So that's how games like Pugmire do well. It's different from other games around. Some people read Mouse Guard, for instance, and thought that was really cool. And hey, I get to play doggos. Doggos are awesome. Cool, I want to try this game. I want a game for younger kids. Hey, this Pugmire looks cute. And that's how they do well, because they are in stores. I've seen them in several gaming stores. So that's another good strategy and things like that. I'm not a publisher, but I've seen a lot of failed dreams on the roadside of gaming history. I've seen people who have done quite well, modestly well. I've seen a few people do very, very well for themselves. My friend Doug is Ballistic Studios is making exclusively making stuff for GURPS, Steve Jackson Games. He's got a working relationship. That's pretty cool. He's actually, basically, from the way I understand it, he's a freelance writer who's got exclusive rights to publish more stuff for GURPS, which GURPS desperately needs since they stopped making print books of a lot of their stuff outside of the main core books. And that's really cool. I love that. And print on demand does help to alleviate a lot of the need of printing off stuff too. It's not as cheap. The profit margin isn't going to be there for printing your own books and selling the physical copies, but print on demand frees you up from liability and risk, and that's pretty handy. Plus, you know, you can leave something on and you don't have to market in front of people. Some people troll those sites and oh, there's something I've never seen before. Throw occasional specials and things out to get your stuff pumped up to, you know, copper, silver, gold, platinum, but, you know, do stuff like that and who knows, you might be able to come up with something. Now, of course, I would encourage anybody like John or anybody out there who sees these videos, if you're interested in more conversation or something like that, I can pretty much always be reached on my email address. That's OmnusI, OMNUSI, @att.net. You can, of course, leave comments in my videos, and as you're seeing right now, I do respond to them. And, you know, I can share insights that I have. I can work with you if you're interested in some products, and I'd be more than happy to review things for people. Again, usually all I ask for is even a digital copy of something. We'll get something out. A physical copy will inspire me more because I have a little bit harder time reading digital print than I do physical stock. So, but either way, I'm always interested in spreading new product. I will always give critique, and I will give fair reviews. If you look at my OmnusI critic reviews, Omnus Critic reviews or the things that I've done in the Lair of OmnusI Tabletop Preservation Society, I give fair and unbiased views. I also do relate my personal experiences and the fun that I've had and why it was fun to me. But if you do want a fresh set of eyes and a voice, albeit a small voice at this point, echoing out into YouTube and my social media connections on Facebook primarily, let me know. I'm open to work with just about anybody. So that pretty much is the advice that I have. Again, this is mostly advice that I've gotten from people in the industry, talking to game developers, watching, keeping an eye on things that have happened, having a very close relationship with my local game store owner, who in this time and era where it's been so hard for game stores to stay open, he actually expanded. He's got 2 and is considering opening another one. So, you know, he's doing something right. He's a very smart man, just unfortunately doesn't... Never mind. I've got some issues that he has some stock that I'm waiting for him to make available for sale, which would help my video channel. But anyhow, I have the connection of a couple of industry bloggers who are very good. I highly recommend for old school rules games, Eric Tenkar at Tenkar's Tavern. He's excellent. And somebody that I very much trust, who keeps an eye on what's going on. He's one of those crusaders against bad actors in kickstarting, and he is an excellent resource for just general industry information from either his podcast, Tenkar's Tavern, or his blog. So I'll just plug them real quick because they're awesome. So that's basically it. Hopefully this helped. Again, by all means, comment if you like, and I will elaborate, or we can discuss things further. If you haven't already liked my OmnusI Facebook page, that's where I put out a lot of stuff, including I'll be putting links to all these videos there as well, so you can take what you like out of them. So I'm also, I think tomorrow, I'm going to be starting up a Lair of OmnusI group. I had a Lair of OmnusI page, but I'd really rather have some place where people could post interesting things, I can comment on them, and we can have more discourse, rather than just a page that I'm throw something up and wait for people to comment on. I think that'll be fun, and I'll be inviting some of my gamer industry friends who might be interested in them. So, at any rate, thank you very much for joining me. I'm Rob, and I'll see you the next time I get in front of this old camera and make one of these videos. Thank you, and thank you so much to John for putting excellent comments on. Of course, I appreciate the flattery. He's very nice to me. But I just appreciate people talking to me and giving me ideas for videos they want to see. I will do that every time, as long as I have the time to do it. But I will make time if I have to for something like this. So if I can be at all helpful, useful, or entertaining to you, let me know. And by all means, keep looking at my videos. I've got an awful lot, and I doubt that you've seen them all. So thank you, and until next time, farewell.